Welcome to The Strategic Leader, the podcast for people-focused leaders who want to think, act and feel more strategic. I'm Gemma Bullivant.
And I'm Fee Craig. In this series, we're tackling the big, hairy questions shaping the world of work and exploring how to respond with strategic clarity, not just strong opinions.
Hi everyone and welcome to the show. It's me, Gemma Bullivant.
And me, Fee Craig. And today's episode of The Strategic Leader, we are going to be answering yet another big, hairy, audacious question. And that question today is, are we too nice at work? So maybe a slightly surprising question. Is it possible to be too nice? What do we mean by nice? How do we know if we're being too nice? If we don't want to be too nice at work, what should we be seeking to be instead? We're going to explore all of these questions. Gem, why are we talking about this one? What makes this quite a big question for you?
Well, I think there's two reasons we're talking about this. The first is a listener has asked us to explore this topic. So, Amy, thank you for your note. Really great to hear from you. And what Amy wanted us to explore was in particular about that tricky area of delivering and receiving uncomfortable news and how to ensure that you've got some accountability in their ownership, that this isn't masked too much around trying to disguise and therefore dilute the message. And the second reason, and it resonated really strongly, and I'm sure, Fee, you've got examples of this. I am asked so regularly to help either individuals, leaders, or often organizations to overcome the fact that the organization is too nice. That in fact, we think that we want to work in a nice organization, and of course we do, generally speaking, but there are some real downsides to being in an environment, a culture, a team, or a one-to-one relationship that is predominantly overwhelmed by niceness.
I completely agree. I'm more likely to hear our culture is a bit too nice. We think we're being a bit too nice as a kind of challenge to be overcome rather than we have a toxic culture. And I think it's probably, it's worth saying that in no way are we going anywhere near advocating an unkind or bullying culture. That isn't what we're about at all. But just in terms of examining the word nice, what do we mean when we say nice? And is that really what we want to be achieving in the workplace? So what do you think, what do you think we mean by the word nice, Gem, when someone says, oh, I want to be nice about it. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice about this.
Yeah, well, you touched on a word there that I think is really helpful to use as a comparison, which was unkind. So what's the difference between being nice and being kind? Now, my take on this is that being nice is reasonably passive and it is pretty superficial.
Yeah.
It is typically avoiding discomfort to maintain harmony. It is something that is really prioritizing the status quo, smooth waters, not ruffling feathers. That's niceness. It's politeness.
And would I also add in the word bland? I mean, we are all taught at school not to use the word nice because it doesn't really describe anything. It's quite indistinct, isn't it? And I think most organizations wouldn't want to be described as indistinct and bland. There must be better words out there that would be sought after more culturally than nice.
Well, I hadn't really thought about blandness, but to offer a better word than nice, let's go to the alternative that I mentioned, which is kind.
Kind, yeah.
I mean, at first glance, people might be listening and thinking, well, what is the difference between nice and kind? Surely they are the same thing. But whereas nice is, as I mentioned, superficial, a little on the passive side, kindness is a little more intentional, a little more seeking to be of service
Right.
or being helpful in some way to the other person.
Kindness is in service to the other person.
Yes,
Niceness is probably in service to the person who is trying to be nice.
I think so. Yeah,
There's intention, there's a difference in intention behind them. I am
yeah.
intending to be of service to you for kindness. And actually, I'm sort of intending to put myself first if I'm trying to be nice because I don't want to ruffle the feathers. I don't want to upset you, in inverted commas.
Mm,
But really, what's sitting behind that? I think there's something behind that that we need to just investigate and shine a light on, isn't it? Which is what am I avoiding by trying
yeah.
to be nice? And how could I lean into that with a kind lens on it?
Mm,
So, what we're going to do is just run through a few questions in this space, think of a few examples, think of a few ideas for you to try to lean into this idea of what can we use as an alternative to being nice? Is it kind? Is it doing the right thing? Or something else in this space. So, it
mm.
might we be avoiding if we are trying to be nice?
My view is that the thing that we're avoiding here is discomfort.
Yes, I agree. Personal, it's uncomfortable for me.
It's uncomfortable for me if this is a really difficult thing to do. So, giving constructive feedback or giving some news that people might find difficult to hear
Mhm.
is not easy.
Yes,
It is not something that we're just going to sail through without thinking about or without perhaps a bit of practice or a bit of rehearsal, and certainly not something that is easy. So, I think the discomfort is the key here because if we can actually get our mindset to expect and be more at ease with discomfort, we are more likely to be able to step into this space in the right way. And we'll come on to that, won't we, in terms of what the right way would be
Mm,
to share uncomfortable news. But that discomfort point, I think, is really key here because I think what we tend to do is we take that sign of discomfort as a sign that we shouldn't say what needs to be said.
yeah, absolutely. One of the key things I remember being taught, and I can't even remember where it came from, but it was so useful to me, is that most things we avoid are actually only 15 seconds of discomfort. Can you get through 15 seconds? So let's say you have to tell someone that they haven't been given a promotion. Sure, the conversation is going to last longer than 15 seconds, but the core bit of information to be transmitted is I am sorry to let you know that you haven't been successful in your promotion. That is less than 5 seconds. So thinking about maybe you've got an hour's meeting in the calendar. That's not you being uncomfortable for an hour. I mean, it could be, but the actual key bit of ultimate discomfort is much, much shorter than that.
Wow, yeah, that's a really helpful reframe. I'd not thought of it like that before. So, in terms of this question of being nice versus being kind, some of the reasons that we are approached to explore this and to help organizations or leaders to overcome is that being nice on the surface feels okay. It is not particularly uncomfortable. And that's the point that we've been making. We're not avoiding that discomfort. But what then happens is expectations become unclear. There are mistakes are repeated because they're not caught and challenged and given the opportunity to improve. Therefore, frustration just keeps growing because the same mistakes are happening, but you're not sharing that those mistakes are happening. Or if you're delivering some unwelcome news, you're skirting around it to the extent that you haven't actually done that 5 to 15 seconds of pain,
Yeah. Yeah.
extending that discomfort out because you've not given the message.
Yes, it's that there is a saying, isn't there, that clear is kind. Is Brene Brown. Clear is kind. So if we're seeking
Mm.
alternative to nice, if we're seeking kindness, then being clear, there is no bonus this year. We all regret that. but that's
Yes,
the fact. That's the clear message. Rather
yes,
than, well, we don't think that, well, we haven't really decided, we don't really know, and it's looking like there may not be, and da 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 da
yeah,
da. We're skirting around the issue is not clear. So people will come away with all kinds of different understandings from that conversation because you haven't done the clearest kind. You've kind of tiptoed
yeah.
around it. And then one thing that we talk about quite a lot when we do feedback, delivering feedback, I think one of the main reasons why people don't deliver feedback is because they feel uncomfortable giving it to somebody. I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. I don't
Mm,
want this person feel uncomfortable. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, actually, whose comfort are you prioritizing here? It could be your own. Are you willing to prioritize somebody else's growth and sacrifice your own comfort in that moment? And it might only be 15 seconds. So why should you prioritize your own comfort over somebody else's growth? If you are a people manager or a leader of any kind, there are going to be moments where you have to prioritize. Somebody needs to know this. They need
wow.
to be clear about it. And if you are prioritizing how comfortable you feel in that moment, you are not doing them a service. So you are not being kind. You are not being clear. You may well be being nice, but you're
Yeah.
not clear and you're not being kind and you're not prioritizing their growth. And that surely is not what we're after. I don't think there's anybody out there that would rather have that than learn something that's truly going to improve their performance.
Well, that's a very powerful example, isn't it, of how nice might be unkind.
Yes. It can be because it's sort of fudging, it's not giving you the tools that you need to improve, it's denying you something, isn't it?
It is. And I would suggest, going back to your earlier point about getting through that 5 to 15 seconds of discomfort, it just extends that discomfort.
Does. It does for both parties. I mean,
Yes.
for example, I've done this terribly the first time I had to do a one-to-one with somebody that I was managing. So I first role in a people manager, first annual review. I had been, I thought, very nice to her all year. I had been giving her lots of compliments. You're doing a great job. I'd been super nice, super encouraging. But she had reasonably enough taken from that niceness. I hadn't delivered any unpleasant messages. She had taken from it that she was doing really well. So when she got to performance review time and I had to say to her that actually, in reality, the hard facts of the matter against the competency framework, she was, I can't even remember, maybe underperforming. It was a real shock. And I remember delivering that message to her and I remember skirting around it so much in pursuit of being nice. Well, I've got some news for you and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but we've had to make some really tough decisions. And, I mean, you could hear me making every excuse under the sun. The minute someone says, don't take this the wrong way, but, that's a niceness personified, isn't it? That's not kind. It's brutal because somebody knows some kind of blow is coming and they're bracing for impact. But you're really putting them through the ringer. So me trying to make myself feel better in that moment, which is I don't want to be a horrible person, was just prolonging the agony for this person. I remember it so well. It was such a huge lesson for me, which is like, don't do that again. Don't put yourself in that position. It would
Mhm.
have been so much easier for me in that moment if I had been clearer with her throughout the year of where
Mm.
she was doing well specifically and where she wasn't doing well specifically. I didn't benefit from that moment either, and she certainly didn't. So that's definitely stayed with me around me trying to be nice. Ended up being really, I mean, maybe it wasn't unkind, but it wasn't pleasant for her, and it certainly wasn't pleasant for me either.
Mm. That's a really good example. I worked once in an organization where we recognized this niceness was really getting in the way of actually being kind.
Mm.
So getting in the way of performance management and in an effective way. And the suggestion for training was difficult difficult conversations training. Let's put some thoughts together on how to deliver that. And we did that, but with one very important change to that, which was that we called the program Courageous Conversation.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And what that did was, of course, they're difficult conversations, and it wasn't minimizing how difficult they were. But what we really wanted to emphasize was that it takes bravery and
Yeah,
courage.
it does. But it's a kind of courage that we don't often talk about in the workplace, which I think
Mm.
courage of, it's sort of a courage of self. It's a real sense of being anchored and centered as a human being and as a professional leader to say, I know that I'm about to go out there and deliver some news to one person or a group, or maybe even to the whole company that is not going to be pleasant. And I know I'm going to take some flack and I know I'm going to take some challenge, but I have to deliver that message clearly, kindly. And so I have to sort of be okay with that. Am I willing to put myself out there and be, for maybe for just a moment, maybe for a day or two, to be unpopular? Am I willing to be unpopular for the sake of clarity, sharing real facts in an authentic manner with everybody who needs to know it? And that does require courage, I think. And it's something that we don't often talk about in terms of leadership skill. But I think there is a real need to be courageous because there's an element of risk involved. You don't really know how they're going to go.
There is absolutely an element of risk, and that must be one of the number one reasons for not wanting to go there. Discomfort is born from the risk of what the reaction might be, how that's going to potentially affect your ongoing relationship, how the message is going to land, and so on. And I really do think that in management and leadership skills training, we focus too heavily on the technical skill, say, of delivering the message, delivering the feedback,
Yeah.
feedback frameworks, all of the above, which are great tools to have,
Mhm.
but we don't lean in enough on how it feels. How it feels to sit in that chair and deliver that piece of information or that message or that communication to that individual, how you're feeling, and then also how that person is likely to be feeling, and tuning into both of those in the right way. And there's a really great framework, isn't there? We use this in the Courageous Conversations work, and I've seen it used in lots of other similar programs. And I refer to it a lot in coaching. And I know you actually have the book
I
as
do.
well.
I have them right here.
And it is Radical Candor, Kim Scott.
Yes, and I'm sure we will have mentioned this before because it is such a great book. It's such a
Mm.
great model. I mean, you can just Google it and get a model. But if we are trying to find an alternative to being nice, then what is that alternative and where does it come from and what are the component parts? So Kim Scott's radical candor model has two axes. One of them is caring personally. Do I care personally about you? So what this for me is about intention. What is my intention in having this conversation in any way with you? It's got to be because you need to know something. You're
Mhm.
going to benefit somehow or other from this. And I want you to be able to benefit from this piece of information because I care about you and I want what is best for you and I want you to be well equipped and I want you to be able to live into your potential. And I care about you personally. And then the other axis is can I challenge you directly? How willing am I to challenge you directly? As in, am I actually just going to avoid talking about this? Am I going to avoid the conflict? Or am I going to lean in and say, look, we have to have a tough conversation here. We have to have a courageous conversation. We have to have this. It could be a bit uncomfortable for a few moments, but could we do it? Can I challenge you directly? Can I clearly and kindly, again, that word kind, lean into what is going wrong and help you put it right? Am I willing
And
to take that on and challenge it? I think that's a real comfort thing. If we can get the challenge directly with the caring personally, that's when we can deliver radical, what Kim calls radical candor.
yeah, that's the sweet spot, isn't it? And
Yes.
I think a couple of really important points there that are worth just pausing on for a second. The first is in relation to the point we made earlier about kindness. It is that being in service of the other person. So you're parking your discomfort in service of the other person's development. Such a powerful quote or phrase, thought that you introduced earlier there, Fee. And you are also doing this, you're in tune with their feelings and your own feelings, but not that those are in any way a blocker, but
Mhm.
that they are a part of your conversation so that you are not just delivering that message with a hammer, you're delivering it with care, thought, and
Yes.
intention for that other person, in service of that other person.
So there's 4 points on this model, and radical candor is what we're aiming for. We talked about the sweet spot. If we have caring personally, but we don't have challenging directly, so I'm not willing to have that difficult conversation with you, then that's what she calls ruinous empathy. And I mean, I really like the example. I can't actually remember if it's in the book or somewhere else. You see a friend or a colleague come out of the ladies and they've got their skirt tucked into their knickers. What do you do? If you are caring personally and challenging directly, you'll go, Jem, I know you're about to walk on stage to deliver a keynote speech, but your skirt is in your knickers, just sort it out. I don't want you I am willing to make you uncomfortable in that split second because I want the best for you, right? Ruinous empathy is, oh my God, Gemma's about to walk on stage with her skirt in her knickers. I can't say anything to her. I don't want to embarrass her. This is awful. I'm not going to mention it. I'm not giving you the chance to resolve it. The other position could be obnoxious aggression, which is when I am going to challenge you personally, but I don't care so much. I don't really care. I'm not being kind. I'm going to say, Gem, look, everybody. Gemma's coming on stage with her skirt and her knickers. Everybody, look, let's all point and laugh. So I have delivered the message. I have leaned into that message, but I've done it in a really unkind way.
And for completeness, using that example, the fourth quadrant Kim Scott mentions she calls it manipulative insincerity. Basically, saying something that somebody wants to hear rather than the truth, or perhaps not saying anything at all. But certainly in that case, it would be probably me asking you that if I look okay, and you saying, yep, you look absolutely fine, crack on, get onto that stage, and away you go.
So there's those sort of adjacent positions that we can fall into. So think really carefully about, where am I on the spectrum of caring personally and challenging directly? Am I caring personally but not actually willing to challenge? Am I willing to challenge but not doing it in a caring way? Are the kind of positions that you could stray into. And I think as we describe these, you probably experienced moments where that's happened.
Yeah. And I really like that example. I think, just calling back to your earlier example where you had your direct report and you had to deliver some pretty robust feedback, having praised and complimented her
Yeah.
during the year, that sounded like ruinous empathy
Very
during.
much so. Yes.
And then it's very hard to go from ruinous empathy to radical candor without it sort of slotting into the obnoxious one, because
Mm.
you haven't set the scene in the
Mm.
right way to enable that conversation to happen. So what would be some of our tips for helping set the scene in a better way to ensure that the person or the people might be ready, or might not take offense or feel threatened by the feedback?
I've got a few top tips for this. Number one would be why am I assuming that they'll be offended by learning something useful? So my aim is, can I say that my aim here is to be useful to you? So back to your idea of being in service of the other person. If I
Yeah.
assume, okay, my intention is to be useful to you, how can I set the whole conversation up in my head in the spirit of being useful rather than in the spirit of telling you something? It just changes the shape of the conversation.
Yeah, so that could be a really helpful little inner monologue pep talk before you.
What is going to be useful for you? I mean, it might be useful for me to get this all off my chest. It might be useful for me to read a list of bullet points. It might be useful for me to rant and rave. Da da da. Not actually, none of that's going to be useful to you. So, what would be useful to you? And then, if you don't know, let's ask. So, the second point would be ask permission. I've got something that I think will be of value to you that I really want to talk to you about. May not be super comfortable, but I think you'll be able to do some really good stuff with it. Are you up for that? Let's ask permission first. Let's not go straight into it. When would be a good time? Do you want to do it face to face? Do you want to do it over the phone? Da, da, da. Let's discuss and agree how we're going to do it. So permission is
Yeah.
another. And then, like the one that we talked about earlier on, to use your word is courage. Just be clear. Clear is kind. Take courage. Step into your courageous leadership self, and deliver the message and let it land. Don't wrap it in cotton wool. We've all heard of the shit sandwich when giving feedback. Tell them something nice, tell them something horrible, tell them something nice. We don't do that. We just say the thing. And then my last tip is ask them about it. What do you think? over to you. Give me your perspective on this. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you've heard. Tell me what you've understood.
Yeah.
You not have been very clear. They may not have understood what you meant. So I guess those were my tips for in that moment, how to kind of set it up differently. But it starts with yourself. How am I coming to this conversation? And how can I come to this conversation in the spirit of being useful to you?
They are great tips, and I've got one to add to build onto that, which is to normalize sharing feedback.
Yes. That's
Normalize,
like a cultural shift.
yes, absolutely, so that it becomes a really normal part of your everyday or your weekly conversations. And I think in a previous episode, we've shared a really useful frame for this, which is what went well, even better if, which is a lovely, positive, quick, you can do it in a matter of a few seconds to check in on something that's happened, whether it's a big project, whether it's just a small thing, whether it's a presentation, what piece of work, whatever it might be. What went well? Give me one thing about that. How could that, even if it's gone really, really well, how could it be even better? Which is the even better if. And what I love about that is it's bringing the culture of feedback, culture of continuous improvement into your everyday lexicon. It's saying, let's just talk about all the ways we could make those minor improvements and not just save the feedback for the big hairy stuff.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. Don't save if somebody needs to know something, don't save it up. They shouldn't. I
Mhm.
mean, one of the things I remember learning really early on is there should be no surprises at an annual or performance appraisal. Now, we've talked and thought a lot about whether annual performance appraisals are even a good thing, but they are a pretty standard thing. So, nevertheless, nobody should be heading towards a surprise. They should all know what's going to happen. And that can be achieved through the spirit of feedback. And what I particularly like about the even better if is there anybody out there who doesn't want to get better, who doesn't want this team meeting to run a bit better, or doesn't want their performance to get a bit better?
Mm.
If there is, then there's kind of a question mark over that person. But we should all really be thinking, actually, are you interested in hearing something that will improve your impact on the rest of the business? Yes, yes, I am. Yeah, please tell me. Don't withhold that. Um,
The other thing that I've just thought about is that the what went well, even better if is like one of those lovely Scandinavian open sandwiches, isn't it? Which importantly means that you're not disguising the main message.
oh, it's the alternative to dish of bread. The Scandinavian open sandwich. Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's a really nice way of thinking about it.
So, nice versus kind. Hopefully, what we have talked about today really does bring home that there is a fundamental difference between being nice and being kind. That it is eminently possible that by being nice, we are actually being unkind.
Yes.
Kindness is the more proactive way of being of service to someone else, acting in their best interests before your own, and not allowing your own discomfort to get in the way of somebody else's growth.
That's a brilliant summary, Jem, a really brilliant summary. And I also just want to call out that idea about it does take courage sometimes to have these conversations. But just because something feels a little bit scary doesn't mean you can't do it. And
Mm,
it does take practice. It's one
mm,
of those things that you will get better at, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to try, you've got to start,
yeah.
and it will get better.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for the prompt. I hope that we have in some way answered some of the questions and thoughts that you had. And if anyone else wants to share any ideas for us to tackle as well, we are all ears. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Fee, for a great conversation.
Thanks, Jem, and thank you to everyone from listening. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. We'd love it if you could subscribe or maybe share with a colleague or just leave us a quick review.
And if you have a big, hairy question you'd like us to explore, or perhaps a strategic dilemma you're wrestling with, just drop us a line, gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk.
And remember, having a strategic viewpoint doesn't necessarily mean having all the answers. It's more about asking better questions, broadening your view, and staying curious.
We'll see you next time.